Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Scales of Music Podcast. It is I, Michael Alvis, alongside Mr. Zack Tinsley. Zack, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm just I'm working a lot, actually, like a lot. So I'm glad that we were able to get some recordings in here. And I'm actually really kind of, I feel like this whole thing with Scales of Music is, I left Indiana and just completely was like, all right, forget it, guys, like, bye, and didn't talk to anybody really. And so ever since I've been doing this, like, this has been like nostalgia moment for me. I'm over here talking to people that I haven't talked to in over a decade. I'm loving it. I'm loving my life. So.
Right. So am I. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by someone close to both Zack and I.
The only good teacher at Columbus East, 2008. Am I right?
Yeah, if not probably the best. The one and only Mr. Kenneth Hauan.
Hey,
Do I call? Can I still? How's this work? Are we on Ken level now, or are we still?
I would say we went into Ken level.
No more Howie K. Like what? What are we doing?
Call me whatever you want. I don't really. You did before,
just
so
keep,
you might as
keep
well
it rolling. We're on a nostalgia high right now. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Would have been a high school dropout if it wasn't for you, man.
Oh, come on.
I mean,
maybe you were a savior for a lot of us. I will say
you knew
that
me when I was 18 too.
Well, I do remember some hijinks, and I do remember couple of what shall we say, creative thinkers.
We were your best class. Easy.
Oh man. But for anybody who doesn't know, Ken here, he was the choral director for East from when did your tenure begin there?
I started in 91 and I finished in 2017.
Wow. That's awesome. And along the way he's what?
Go ahead.
And along the way he's got some competitions under his belt, some awards, very accomplished within the choral world. Probably one of my honestly favorite directors that I've had.
How many have you had? 2?
Well, I'm putting into account you, Miss Schrader from 6th grade.
Oh yeah,
the guy you replaced at Central.
Yeah.
And then the guys I had at show choir camp. But yeah, you outplay all those guys. Period.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, but someone who I highly look into his opinion and his insight on anything in terms of music. But I have him here today because I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about music and its implementation within the educational system and why it's important. But I wanted to kind of start off with just like a brief overview of you. I mean, you've got not only just a teaching tenure underneath your belt. What's a little bit of your performance history? Is within like operatic and stuff like that.
Where does one start? I started performing when I was little, and I would say when I got really into it in high school, I had really fine high school choir teacher by the name of Don Anderson. God rest his soul. He passed away a few years ago, which kind of got me into seriously studying classical music and choral music and voice and stuff. And during that time, then I was in a lot of, high school productions and some community theater stuff. And in college, I did a few things there. And then I was teaching in Hutchinson, Minnesota, and in Bemidji, Minnesota, doing some theater stuff there, and then moved to Bloomington, Indiana, where I went to IU for graduate school in voice performance. Ended up doing character roles, not leading roles, but character roles in just about every opera I could be in there, because one show is on stage while another is rehearsing. So you can only be in every other show. You can't do back-to-back shows because you can't get staging and performing at the same time. And then after that, and even a little bit during that, I did some professional gig stuff, but I would say towards the end of graduate school, I realized that performing was not my niche. I loved it, but I didn't have to be there. What I really wanted to be was back in the classroom. And so, and that was my, it was weird to use the term my calling, but I knew, and I knew early on, and then it was kind of reconfirmed, I guess, or whatever, in my grad school years, that I was put on this earth to be a teacher. And so the story goes that I was in the costume shop at IU working on a show, and that I was not actually, I was in it, was Hello Dolly, and got a phone call from Ray LeBlanc. I don't know if you guys were there when he was there, but you probably would have heard of him. He's a theater guy.
The name does sound familiar.
Yeah, he was an amazing man. You guys would have loved him. Anyway, he said, we have a choral position open. Can you come for an interview today? And I said, well, can we make it tomorrow? I'd like to do a little research into, who I'm going to see and what the school district is and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, yep. So I went and I met with him and Barney Halishak, who was the HR guy. In the meantime, I had spoken with Eric Stark. Eric now has the symphony chorus, and he's the chairman of the department at Butler. And his mother was the Bartholomew County arts gal. And he went to North. But I said, so Eric, what can you tell me about Columbus East? And he said, you want to be there. He said, it's the performing arts school in Columbus. The choirs there are amazing. So I was like, oh, okay. So then I went.
Say no more.
And then I went and interviewed, and it went very well. And the next day they called and said, we'd like to hire you. And this is a week before school started. So I was like, I guess I'm going to be back in the classroom sooner than I thought. But all along, the performing stuff, operatically and musical theater wise, was always kind of a secondary thing for me. Teaching was where my heart was and still kind of is. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, that definitely resonated with a lot of the people that you were around. That is for sure. You were very good at what you did, and I think really put that, in front of a lot of people. And I was joking around a little bit, but at the same time, I was not, focused my senior year. I already had the grades that I needed to go. I got accepted to both, Florida College and Western Kentucky, which were the only two schools that I applied to. And, I needed 3 classes. I needed to get a 2.5 GPA. And if it wasn't for, choir at, 5B after my 3 lunches in a row, spending, my life at, Grant Adams' house with Darnell Jones, and they dropped me off dude, I got to go back. I got to go, Howland will kill me if I don't get back to class. If it wasn't for that, then, I don't know how I would have gotten through that time. We can probably thank a girl for inviting me to do choir, but when I was in it, I was like, man, this is where I need to be.
Who was it?
I
think I know who it is.
She's married now. It's all good. But your first name is after a queen of England, the one, a couple before Elizabeth.
Yeah.
That one. So, but yeah, man, like I said, we both were in drama and different things like that. And as much as I liked it, dude, that choir class, I really like, I put it off my sophomore year and my junior year. But then when I did it my senior year, it was like, man, I should have been doing this the whole time, and it was fun. When you said it was your calling to be a teacher, I think, that's definitely true, man. Cause like I said, I slacked off a lot in high school, but the one thing I do remember is those classes and the things that you did, and you let us be kids and you let us have fun, but at the same time, like, taught me a lot of stuff and a lot of things that I see a lot in, like, my sons, and kind of I want to get them into music and different things like that. Things that I didn't do, that even at the time I was like, man, I should have done that. You know what I mean? And you were a big part of that, man, like, for sure. And I know you were for a lot of people, especially from, 04, 08 to 08 when I was there. And yeah, and you saw it, like, I saw it too as a student. People would come. There were all kinds of people that would come to our shows from the freaking 90s. And, as good as our drama department was, like, 99% of the time they came to see you. You know what I mean? So that was a big, that was a big thing. So,
yeah,
I mean, that was you definitely, I've been patting people on the back today. So today, now you're getting one.
Well, it's interesting. Since I've retired, I think I even put this on Facebook at one point, and people got all shook up. But it was kind of like, as men in America, here comes a philosophical statement, but we really kind of draw a lot of our self-worth from what we do as a living, and
oh yeah,
and really our identity is really tied into that. And then come June 1st 2017, all of a sudden I wasn't doing it, and so it became sort of, how am I defining myself now for the next part of my life? And in addition to that, then I moved to Chicago. So anybody who would have known me sort of even by reputation isn't around. And so I'm just this guy who says he was a teacher, but I sort of found I was losing some of my identity, I guess. But so it's
and now you have bigger arms than both of us and awesome tattoos.
Yeah, and bigger calves than I will ever have.
Yeah, my knee swallowed a watermelon, so
No. Oh man. Well, you talked about calling, and it's not necessarily. I mean, it takes a certain person to really embrace what a teacher's supposed to be, and be the individual who is educational, but also relates to the kids, and just make sure that they've got somebody watching over them, which is what we all wanted. That kind of friend-teacher relationship, which we had.
Yeah.
What was it about in the educational sense that drew you in? Is like I'd rather teach. Did you feel like you wanted to make an impact forward with how much it benefited you with music-wise, or what was the driving force of that? Was anything noticeable?
In a nutshell, yes. But I would say that there are several factors. I felt my gift was the ability to understand that age group and sort of go with it, knowing that, not everyone's going to be the perfect student, and not everyone's going to be highly motivated. Some are going to be in there because they want to make it a career, and some will be in there because it's fun. And so then part of what I felt was that it was a place where I could make a difference. I was also, my philosophy on education was that it was very important to educate the whole person, not just the nuts and bolts of life.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was my responsibility to open minds, not just fill them. And partly to equip students and hopefully kind of excite them for some lifelong learning. I mean, here we are, 15 years later, and you guys are still talking music, whether it's a style of music that, we agree on or that we all like, you're still there.
It ain't the halftime show though.
I did. Oh, I hate it.
No halftime show though.
No.
But so the calling for me was that because I felt I had something to offer, I guess, and that I had a relatively unique approach to the classroom where, let's face it, you guys know I was not the strictest disciplinarian, but I would say that more often than not, I would try to diffuse situations with humor. And more often than not, kind of like, come on, guys, really?
Well, when you have me and Clay Blackwell and Zack Waddle in the back of your class, I mean, what are you going to do?
I mean, you just have to appreciate who you are and go with it. Because there's no way that, if I had even tried to squelch that energy, you guys would have just had none of it. And so it more had to be, how do I use that to kind of keep them engaged and at least singing?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about like our talent level. We probably weren't the best class that you had in terms of a talent level, but I would say in terms of fun level, you got to put us in the top 3.
You're right.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
You loved us, brother. You know you did.
I do.
You know you did.
I haven't seen Clay on any online or anything. Is he still kicking somewhere?
I do. I don't know. I'm right there with you. If people don't have an online presence with me, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
I see some posts from Zack every once in a while, but I don't see anything from Clay.
Yeah, I see Travis every now and then. Every now and then I see some of the other people, but it's been. I mean, people are kind of coming back out of the woodwork just because families are building up and stuff like that. So we're seeing each other again.
Well, for me, it's everybody just kind of runs together. I usually remember students that I've had, but when exactly I had them in class, I don't remember. There's sort of an early, middle, late grouping, but specific years, no.
Gotcha.
And what makes us even older, Mike, is that we were middle.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Late middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, late middle. We were the tail end of middle, but still,
Jeez. So, in terms of speaking of school and the classroom and stuff like that, in terms of that aspect, a lot of people I've noticed, and it's kind of become more and more popular subject. People don't necessarily think it's kind of important to have music in schools and just the arts in general. We all can vouch for the supplemental benefit of the class, but not only from the educational standpoint, but from what we learn in the life lessons. How important is it for you to kind of push or be like a supporter of keeping the arts involved with school? And why do you think it needs to be continuously involved, and if not involved, protected and benefited more with like funding and stuff like that?
Well, it's kind of the debate that's been going on for decades, but I would say that a couple of things. I think that the trend in American schools right now is away from educating the entire human. It's become, if you're not going to major in it, or if it's not going to become a career choice, you don't need to take it, or you don't need to be doing it, or it doesn't need to be offered. And the arts always take a hit generally first because people think they're extraneous or superficial or superfluous, to use some multisyllabic words, or kind of fluff, I guess. But and I'm admittedly old school, when I first started teaching and up until the Bush administration passed the No Child Left Behind thing, and particularly at Columbus East, we were more concerned about providing an extremely well-rounded education for all. And so that would include things like advanced art classes, choral stuff, the 5 levels of acting we used to teach, and in the and whatever in the art department that was very active with the fellows that were teaching there. And I think we offered 6 foreign languages at one point, including Latin, which I think would have been great because it's the root of an awful lot of languages.
I would have took that.
Me too.
My wife and I are having a debate about that right now, actually.
Latin is I think, a very important language to know because the Romance languages come out of that. Plus, of course, you have medical terminology and all of that stuff that is in there. But anyway, we used to really strive to provide an education that was broad, and allowed students to really kind of explore what their interests were. When I first started there, let's see, I had a couple of students who their senior years, because they were so interested in the arts, spent every class period other than econ and English in the music area. They were in the band, they were in choir, they were doing stuff with in the theater area. And because they had a really strong interest there, and we were able to provide them the guidance and the education as a springboard to what was going next. And then the flip side of that, we would have students who were there maybe 1 or 2 periods a day, mods a day, and then went off to other things. But at least they were being exposed to culturally different things, a little more diversity than there may have been somewhere else in the building. Hopefully very open-minded people, because you know how Columbus is. It's certainly not blue. And so, we really worked hard to provide that kind of stuff.
No.
And then, I'm not going in further.
You just gave George Bush a compliment a few seconds ago.
No, I didn't, because the No Child Left Behind, it was the program that started kind of our slide into what we have now, which is
I see what you're saying.
Travesty. It was by itself is a great concept, but what it has become is this. I'm not even sure it's become this sort of idea of. It's like everybody going to a competition and getting a participation trophy, and we don't allow children to learn from maybe not getting first place or maybe not getting a gold star. And so it isn't reality, and it isn't life, and it's not, we're banning books, and burning books in some cases. We're now trying to change American history so that we don't teach a black child, that what the actual history was and what actually happened, or an indigenous person, what's there. And so No Child Left Behind was kind of the beginning of that slippery slope. And right now, especially in Indiana, um, it's way out of control. And so um, I'm not even sure where I'm going with it, other than I strongly believe that we need to get sort of back to educating the kid and opening minds, and allowing them to learn to think for themselves, and form their own opinions. And a lot of people are really threatened by that, because they want their child to think exactly like they do.
Mm-hmm. And the arts kind of allow you, they're an expression of yourself, they're an expression of freedom, basically. Well,
Yeah.
freedom of expression, sorry. And I can see where kind of choking that and getting rid of that can kind of limit and kind of take away from that. And sadly, it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
It's just,
So the arts are kind of for me, and one of the avenues that should always be available to kids, because there are a lot of students who I don't think, well, I know because they've told me, would not, and you guys just did too. I wouldn't have finished high school if it weren't for being able to be in choir. The art room is that way for a lot of kids. And I mean, every student, I think, needs to find a place where they feel like they fit.
Yeah, and that comes from two. I mean, Michael has definitely tried to make like a life and a career in some way of it. I just, for me, it was different. Like you said, it was sort of a this is where I need to be. It kind of kept like a level head. And again, I mean, that's kind of where, you have a different approach on things, because, you were an educator before some of these times
Right.
that has happened. And one of the things that, I always thought was great about the way that you approached it was, which I'm not, I mean, again, as a parent, this is where I'm struggling, right? Like, I don't necessarily know that a lot of teachers do take this approach, which was you could have a kid like Eric Likens, who's been on the show as well, who's very far right leaning.
Yes.
Someone like
Love it.
myself, which is more of a centrist, but I would consider
Right.
myself more on a conservative side, mostly fiscally, really, outside of, but then, really identifying with other kids. So what I mean by that is that you never made, I don't think, Eric or myself or even kids who are more sort of politically like yourself ever feel different. It was all about music, and it was all about like understanding that. And, that was always a thing that, I have always thought sometimes in my life. There are times in my life that I literally sit down and I go, okay, I am in a room with someone who is wildly opposite of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly will think about times that you handled that situation, and, with 17, 18-year-old kids who clearly grew up in homes that taught them things that were wildly differently from what you would have, like if you were my
Right.
dad or you were his dad, or whatever else, right? And I think that's the way that it should be. And unfortunately, I think there is this slippery slope of parents want to shelter what their kids learn, but then now there's a lot of teachers that, because of that, they feel like they got to interject themselves in it. And I don't, but then, you know what I mean? Like it's like there's so much of a divide between the two that there is no coming together for some,
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that kind of brings me to my next question. Like, is it hard to kind of have a say in just kind of keeping these guys focused as far as like making sure it's still in the curriculum? And like we've seen those crazy PTA meetings where it's just parent.
Well, it changed a lot from 91 to 2017. I can tell you that much. I was far more autonomous at the beginning than, especially after the right to work legislation passed in Indiana, which would have been during Mitch Daniels' time. and not Tony Bennett, the Bennett years when he was Secretary of Education, where teachers basically lost their bargaining rights. And we sort of became, well, let me put it this way. When I was first hired in, Phil Houston was principal there. And he said, hadn't even met him until the first day of school, or first teacher day. And I said, you're a trusting soul. You've hired somebody in your building that you've never met. And he said, well, I expect people to do their jobs, and that's what I expect from you. and then and he said,
How capitalist of that man.
I know, that's something. But and then he said, you're hired in as the expert in your field. It would be ridiculous of me to pretend that I know as much about it as you do. And he said, your job is to teach those kids how to sing and everything that goes along with that. My job is to make sure you can do that. And
I like this guy.
Yeah.
Oh, you would have adored him.
Sounds like a guy that might have actually gotten me back in the classroom and not never teaching,
Yeah.
you know. I make no bones about it. That's my degree. And my degree is in secondary education, and I've not spent a single day in the classroom. And unfortunately, 10 years later almost, I kind of don't regret it because of all the things that have been going on. And, I almost hate saying that because it was something I was so passionate about, from 19 to 22, did my student teaching, all that stuff. And for the first 4 or 5 years of my career, I was like, all right, maybe I should really think about getting back into doing what I thought that I loved. And I look at 2022, some of the things people are saying about how, like, all right, all curriculum has to be posted online and weird things that aren't even about performance. And I'm just like, I'm so glad that I've never taken a paycheck from the government at this point. So, I love the fact that you got to do it in a time that you were able to be yourself. And, I was actually able to go to a public school that actually cared about me and different things like that and cared about our teachers. And, that's sort of why we're having this conversation is, I'd like to get back to that.
Well, because the last few years of my teaching career, I used to think I was kind of burned out, but I really think I was just so demoralized. It wasn't burnout. It was all of the crap. And I was dealing with far less than what the teachers said, especially the last 2 or 3 years with the pandemic. And, that was not in my, it's not in my pay scale and was not at all what I studied to do. And so it was time for me to go when I went, but I have the deepest sympathy and empathy with the teachers now because I don't think I could have done it.
People are depressed, and it's really changed a lot of people's lives, and I can't even imagine, especially educators, like they have to live by a rule of law that a lot of people just don't have to live up to because of demand. And like you've said before, dealing with parents, like some parents are this way and some parents are this way, and you basically have to be all of those things when you're, again, especially a public educator. And that's what I'm saying. Like these last 2 years, I've kind of looked back on my life like, wow, I maybe dodged a bullet there. Because I've told my wife, I'm serious. I've said, like, I really think that if I was a high school teacher, if I would have actually done it, I don't know if I would be now anyway, because I don't know if mentally I could have handled these last 2 years.
Knowing what I know now, I don't know that, if I was, 23 or whatever, looking at starting a career, I don't think I would do it.
Right. And that's sort of where I would have been, about 7 years in.
And I loved it. Yeah, I loved it. And I was very passionate about it. And so I know that there's a huge pool of people who were very passionate about teaching and very passionate about that who aren't doing it and should be. But to kind of get
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. It's very unfortunate. But kind of get back to the arts, there's tons of research that show that music education is fundamental to brain development, and that generally speaking, if it's early on, that the brain gets wired in a way that allows students to excel in other areas. And it may not be true for everyone, but there's a lot of research that shows that. So
Help me for sure.
yeah, that's kind of the big, the given. Um, it's not new science. From a philosophical standpoint, I think that it's really important to open minds and to expose. I mean, how many classes are you going to go to where you sing in 5 languages?
Right. I mean, I've said all
Yeah,
the
exactly.
time, like I really, I'm in sales, and I really do believe my arts classes help me as much as anything, because, when you're in drama, you're doing, like, you're reading things that you have to dissect, like Shakespeare and that kind of stuff. Right. So then when you read other things, you kind of, all right, I know how to process something I don't really understand. Right. Or memorizing a script, and then memorizing a pitch. Or in music, you have to think on your toes, and you have to create, and you have to sing and dance and do things, and do 3 and 4 things at a time. And for someone like myself who wasn't sporty, who didn't play sports to get that activity, it was music that did that for me. And
Yeah,
you apply that in life, honestly.
yeah, I agree. It's going to teach you creative problem solving to some degree, because with in the arts, you're having to make a decision about something just about every nanosecond. And, it's sort of, well, how am I going to approach this phrase? How am I going to, am I saying this French word to make it sound French, or do I just sound like a hack?
You used to get on to me so bad. For some reason, I couldn't sing in French. I could sing in everything else, but I was like, "Fit," I couldn't do it.
Well,
Hated it.
it's one of those things. At least you tried.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah. It's like it. I think it's going off what you said there. The lasting impact of what it has as far as like making life decisions and stuff like that, and it's kind of relating to not only how to analyze it, but also thinking back to and relating that. So like when stress and life gets crazy, you've got like a calming place to go to.
mm-hmm.
You can relate back to your old days and stuff like there's tons of times when I honestly, like, if I'm kind of stressed out, I'll just kind of zone out, daydream, and just replay the days of when we would all do the awakening all the time and stuff like that, because I love that piece so much.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like a calming, stabling factor for me. So it's just like, you know what, it'll be all right, because like I've been through a lot, but I've been in a moment as beautiful and as precious as that. So I can still have better days down the road, because I've been a part of such a memorable moment back in my past. So I seeing places trying to pull music out of the education curriculum is just devastating for me, because like you said, it's way more beneficial than I think these upper bigwigs and
Well, for part of me,
higher up
that is that where do those students go during the day? If nothing else, I always felt like the choir room was a good sanctuary for people to get away from all of the crap that was going on in the building. And,
Yes.
everybody deals with a whole lot of whatever. And, my room, I always worked hard to make sure it was a safe place to be. And regardless of who you were, what your credo was, regardless of whatever, your pink polka dot, black, Chinese, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
Come in here and feel welcome. And I'm sure there were other kids in choir who were somewhat judgmental, but I tried to, kind of try to keep that at a minimum. Or if it happened, then all right, let's see what we can learn from this.
Well, I mean, look, the proof is in the pudding there too. Like I had a couple friends that of the few friends that I had outside of the theater and choir scene, all of them were like why does it sound like you guys are always having a party in there? I'm like, because we freaking are. Like,
Because we are.
you know what I mean? Like,
Because we were.
I would tell some of my buddies that like they were all, I think they were like too cool to be in choir or whatever. But I'm like, look, man, go in there.
Yeah.
The girls are hot and we have a lot of good time, man. Why? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is there? That's what I kept telling them. I'm like, what is there to say is nerdy or dumb about this? This is like the most awesome place ever because you get a plethora of really interesting people. And again, that was a testament to your teaching, is that you really understood how to create that melting pot. You just did. You know what I mean? And I think it was from that.
Yeah.
I think it was from that style of
Effortlessly almost.
allowing us to be who we were, but then bringing us home. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the things that I really remember about choir and music class was how you were able to just bring us home. You know what I mean? Like, we would stop and be like, all right, like, let's practice. Let's do this. Like, Michael or Clay or myself or Eric or Travis, we'd be messing around, like joking around about some song we think we can sing. And you'd be like, you guys suck. And we'd be like, oh, really? And then you would get on the piano and teach us actually how to sing it. And it would bring us home. You know what I mean? And that was what was cool. Like,
we look at each other and be like, okay.
Were you guys there when Brent Talbot was student teaching?
I don't think so.
I don't think I was.
He told me one time that, anyway, he was probably my best student teacher. And he's now like head of the music ed department at some university out east. And he's becoming like a national leadership figure in it. And when the first couple times I let him be in front of the choir, well, actually the first time, and I don't remember the piece of music he was working on, but he got done. It went okay, but the kids left the room, and I said, if you don't improve your piano playing, I'm never letting you in front of that class again.
Oh, no.
And he told me that like 10 years ago. He said, do you remember when you said that? I said, does not sound like me, but I may have. And he said, you really pushed me because it wasn't good enough. And I know it wasn't good enough. And you told me that, and you were like, if you don't get this, they're going to eat you alive.
Well, and there was all kinds of different things. For me, there was two instances on both sides of the spectrum that I was like, man, this is the way it should be. One was, I believe like me and Clay and Eric were working on something, and you literally looked at us and you were like, why can't you just hit that note? Basically, not like an explanation as to how to do it, or just looked at us and was like, why? And at first I was like, what in the world? Like, and then I realized it was, okay, I got to figure this out. Like, I got to understand what I'm doing wrong. You're not just going to tell me every time. And then that was on the, criticism part. And then the other time, for me specifically was, when I was trying out for the lead role my junior year, and you and I had worked on it for a long time. And I was like, I'm getting it. Like, this is my time, baby. And I got sick the night before. And I did my audition with a hoarse voice, and it was for I think Guys and Dolls, and I had to hit a really high note. I could not hit it. So I decided like I'm gonna try a different song, like a hymn or something, because I'm like, I gotta at least make my voice sound good. And at the end you were like, yeah, I didn't get the part. And I just remember you saying to me like, that should have been yours. You had it, and it was totally out of your control. And it just made me go, you know what? Like, it sucks that didn't happen, but to know that I had it, there was cool, and that was always like the good thing that I had about choir, was that I was able to get the reassurance, but to also learn. You didn't always, oh, great job, pat on the back. It was a class. It was a experience, and a lot of ups and downs, and it was awesome. And I remember that. Like, I remember it, man. I remember, like, those are the few things I remember in high school, and those are two things I really remember really well.
Nice.
I still recall whenever I was bummed out about not getting I a higher tiered character in Grease because I was really bummed. I was really going for Danny, and I ended up getting Duty. But you kind of reeled me back in and said, it's like you're still getting, you're still playing a part of the main, but you're being a bigger asset and a bigger help to the position because she kind of needed a little bit more of a male presence in terms of dancing.
Yeah.
And then when I got through the production and stuff like that, and I'm just like, okay, this really isn't as bad as I thought it was. And I was centered on kind of what I wanted. It reeled me back into center. It's like, okay, how can I help the team out here instead of just doing what I wanted? I wanted Danny, but I was like, this still works.
Well, I mean, if I had gotten every role I wanted, I probably wouldn't have taught. I would have been standing on the Metropolitan Opera stage singing Koloff, but
sorry.
It wasn't. In high school, it wasn't that difficult for me because there weren't that many people in my high school that sang well. And in college, I didn't get the roles that I wanted, and definitely in graduate school, that was a real awakening. Sort of, I went there thinking I'd become this great opera star, and I'm convinced I could have made a living, but not singing the roles that I really wanted to get. And so the lesson learned is you work with what you have, and do the best you can when you can. And there are days when, like, if you get sick, it sucks. But,
right.
You have no control over that. And so you just do the best you can on any given day.
So what would you give advice to someone who is currently teaching in the arts, be that choir or band or whatever it is? Like if let's say I were to say, I want to do this right now, this is what I'm going to get into, I know we said it's kind of hard right now. You're not sure you do it, but what advice would you give somebody wanting to really knowing all the restrictions and all that stuff? What would you tell somebody to do, and how can we kind of get it on track? So we can't get it on track with people in the government ain't going to help us. Trust me. How would we do that? How would we do that as individuals? Like, what would you say if you were starting right now? What would you do?
I'd definitely search out an area that's arts rich. Well, let me rephrase that. That wants to be. Because your support there is going to be pretty strong, whether or not it's administratively or not. But right now it's all about parents. And so if you get a parent on your side, then you're going to make some progress there. So one would be, where are you going to do this? There's no place in Indiana right now that I would teach, period. So because of the atmosphere from the legislature. So that would be one. Number two would probably be, stick to your guns. Make sure you know what you're about. And if you're, and sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? I would say sort of unwavering, without being completely inflexible.
Resiliency.
Yeah, but still knowing what your core values are and what you're good at, in terms of technique, in terms of the literature you're going to teach, what your expectations are, how do you make it accessible, those kinds of things that, you're not going to walk into too many places like I did where, at East, where the choir was pretty damn good when I started to begin with. So I inherited some good stuff. But in most, and in Columbus, where there are so many good voice teachers. And so you have to be the one to kind of define what it is you want to do, know what your mission is, and sort of be kind of unwavering in terms of what you're willing to compromise and what you're not willing to compromise. and then know your students. I mean, one of the reasons I loved teaching so much is that I had an opportunity to know the students for over the course of time pretty well. And in a lot of cases, I probably spent more time with my students than their parents did.
Yeah, I can see that. For sure.
So, you just have to, my advice, I guess, is get good training, know what you're about, and then know when it's time to compromise and when it's not. And seek out an atmosphere where you're getting some support, and where you can kind of make decisions for your program pretty autonomously without someone who knows nothing about what you're doing dictating how you do it.
Yes.
I think what was so demoralizing part of it for me at the end was, and it was at the beginning, my student teaching sucked. I was bad at it. But I was trying really hard to to be the kind of teacher they were telling me I had to be. And then when I got to my first job, which took me a long time I interviewed like 10 different times and finally got a job. Then I didn't have somebody breathing down my neck and looking over my shoulder and telling me this is what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. I just did it the way I knew how, and loved it. And I had that freedom at East up until about the time you guys left. And then it started kind of going away, and then they started telling me how to do it. And I thought, nope, I can't do it that way.
And you definitely had a passion for it. And like you said, everything that you said, I think you live by. Because like I said, I mean, I ended up gravitating from spending time, in the drama room to the choir room. That was where I went to, because that was like where I kind of found that peace at school. I mean, that was it.
Yeah, important. Yeah,
yeah. It was like you kind of bring yourself back home, and it's just like, all right, get through the day and stuff like that, and just kind of helps you recollect everything, and just kind of sweeten things up, and just realize you're part of something special, and life's not so
kids
bad,
realize that, like, that's the thing. When I look back on school, high school, college, whatever, when I look at like, who are my favorite teachers, right? It's always the ones that I could tell loved giving me the information that they knew and were good at. You know what I mean? And that was one of the things about choir that was awesome. It was just like, man, this guy just loves doing this thing, And even though it's probably killing him inside that we want to do a Backstreet Boys tribute,
No, I love Backstreet Boys.
But anyways.
Oh man.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to don't want to do any halftime shows unless the Backstreet Boys.
Hey, maybe one day we'll get Backstreet Boys and sing at a halftime show.
Yeah. I think probably not.
Yeah, I don't think they go over too well.
Well, real quick, I want to ask one more thing.
Go ahead, Zach.
And then Michael wrap it up here for us. Well, what are you doing these days, man? Like, what's we've been talking a lot of like heavy stuff. We've been into the government and all this. I mean, let's give us the good stuff. What's going on with you right now? Like, how's retirement?
Chillaxing.
Well, I mean, it's been interesting, I would say. How do I put this? I am not doing any music at all, other than I have a voice student or two. And I enjoy that much of it. But when I was done, I was really kind of done. After now 5 years, I wouldn't mind finding a project to do. But I'm not interested in anything long term. Short project, doing a show would be kind of fun, whatever. I am doing modeling for art classes. I am working at a museum part-time. I am volunteering a couple places here and there. I'm enjoying my dogs, and my partner and I do a lot of road trips with them. I'm kind of making it a goal to get to as many national parks as I can before I'm done.
That's a good one.
So it's not, when I was teaching and I was doing all of that stuff, I was doing so much stuff. I was at school from 6 a.m. until whenever, a lot of times 10 o'clock at night. Or if I would, and then I think, well, no, before you guys came in, I was also directing the Gay Men's Chorus in Indianapolis and doing a lot of that stuff. So it was, 15 rehearsals a week, and it was a lot. I loved doing it. I don't know how I did it, but now that it's kind of passed, I'm sort of like, well, that was pretty cool. But I've done a little bit of judging, like solo ensemble and that kind of stuff, but not very much.
The good old days.
So, and the last 6 months has not been easy, and so I'm just kind of reevaluating what it is I want to do for this last chapter.
And now you're on a podcast where you're like, oh my, I got to talk to that idiot again.
No.
Yeah, these two dudes.
It's kind of reminiscing, and
good,
sort of feels good.
Yeah. Well, I will say, I need to start utilizing this thing more. So if you need another vocal student, I need to get my chops back.
Okay.
So definitely be in talks on that. But no, it's definitely been fun. Kind of catching up and knowing that you're doing well, stuff like that, and still going with it. And I'm really excited hearing that you're kind of getting that itch back. So it's
a little bit.
So that's awesome. But one thing that we always do with everybody that comes on the show, we always just kind of like ask them about what's your favorite pieces over the years, what songs kind of inspired you and kind of kept you going over the years, and what would be some songs you would recommend to somebody who's not necessarily like into like the choral or opera genre, just kind of like some songs that open their mind. Dun, dun, dun.
I know. I'd have to give that one a lot of thought because most of my favorite stuff is classical. So, and that's what I listen to almost exclusively. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just today I was listening to the Enigma Variations by Edward Elgar, which is a fabulous piece of music. I love the Verdi Requiem. So some of those things. I haven't listened to any pop tunes or anything recent since I stopped teaching at the middle school in 17. So I wouldn't even know where to.
You're not missing much, I'll tell you. I mean, there's some stuff that's all right, but I mean, pretty much after we graduated, like it just kind of got progressively worse in some areas.
Say, if you stopped listening to pop music in 2017, then we did at the same time, basically.
Yeah. I haven't heard anybody that intrigues me or that I find interesting vocally. And there's not a lot of craft to what's being written right now. So
I'm not the only one that thinks that.
No. And pop music has always been somewhat formulaic to begin with. You get a verse, bridge, verse. But I grow weary of that, I guess. So favorite songs for me would have been really old.
That's why we asked.
That's completely fine. We're all about education,
Yeah,
broaden
I
horizons here.
like Backstreet Boys in terms of pop tunes, and
Mhm.
I liked Whitney Houston a lot, and because there was a voice there, it wasn't just a couple of catch tunes. Um, I liked, who else? Believe it or not, there's a couple of Britney Spears tunes I kind of liked. Michael, were you in show choir when we did the road show?
Yes.
Yeah, I liked a lot of those. That with
Doobie Brothers,
vehicle and
Vehicle,
Life is a Highway, and some of
Life is a Highway. Oh God, that was Sean Eck, wasn't it?
who?
Did Sean choreograph that?
No, I think that was either Christy or Marty.
Yeah, maybe it was Marty. I know Sean
might
did
have
something
been him.
for us.
Might have been him. So
It was
wow,
I still remember that. That's bad.
That's a long time ago. So my favorite stuff is all classical music by far.
Definitely dive into some classical music there, people.
Why not? I mean, it's a wealthy world of literature there.
Well, like I said, man, it was great catching up. This was, I'd say this show is probably more for me than maybe who's listening right now. I just, love going back and talking to you, but I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. I think you really gave us a lot of insight on the arts and kind of where they are in school and sort of what we should be looking either forward to or how we should look forward to the future. So I'm really glad, especially with me. I've got 3 kids, 6, 4, and 3 months old. And I have to make a lot of decisions about school with them and what I'm doing. Thomas is in kindergarten right now, and we're having to make a lot of decisions. And it's been hard. Where
I'm going to give you my 2 cents, and I know we're running over.
Yeah, you're fine.
My partner was homeschooled all the way through K-12, and I used to be very much against that, just because there was no social outlet. But he was able to find that in other places.
I guess I'll just say now, like that's actually what we're doing right now, and we're trying to decide whether or not we're going to continue it. And the cool thing about homeschool now is that they do have co-op programs where they can be in classroom 2 days a week or 3 days a week and that kind of stuff. And so we haven't really decided on a public school or anything like that yet. So that's why he's doing that now. It's interesting that you're saying that, because that's sort of the decision we're having to make, actually.
Well, he is a brilliant man. And I think part of it is because he could go at the pace that he wanted to go at. And so he would have been completely bored in a traditional classroom.
Oh, yeah.
Because he would get things done so much faster. And, I think he finished his high school curriculum at 16. And so then he went off to college and had to sit in a traditional classroom, and it drove him nuts.
Oh, I bet.
Because he had to wait for other people to get done before the class would move forward. So
and you can also just learn about like what your kid is good at and what they're interested in. And that's, like we were talking about the Latin thing. That's what's so funny is actually in the curriculum that we've been looking at, they want them to learn Latin. And that's why I was saying we're having a debate about it because, my wife was sort of like, they really need that or whatever. So to hear you both say that, I'm almost, when we're done, run, hey, maybe that's a great idea.
Right.
100%. I am in favor of learning Latin because of if nothing else, it opens up vocabulary to, just about every. But anyway, so if a person were doing, and maybe even if I had kids now, I probably would look seriously at homeschooling, and then having them in the arts somewhere else.
That actually makes me feel kind of good because we've really debated this for a while. We did decide to homeschool him this year because there was still a lot of not in classroom anyway in public school. So it was kind of like, who cares,
Yeah.
But then throughout this year, we've been trying to decide whether or not we want to continue to do that. So to hear you say that is actually sort of helping me. So thank you.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love public education. I don't like where it is right now, and I don't like the direction it seems to be going. And so, if I were a parent now, I'd seriously consider other alternatives. And that's unfortunate because it's really what, and I'm sorry, Zach, it's what the GOP wants. Because
Hey,
I
man,
remember,
I ain't no fan of no GOP, brother.
okay, because I remember
I
Mitch
left that ship a
Daniels.
while ago.
Okay, Mitch Daniels and Mr. Bennett, when they were in charge in Indiana, their quote was, "If we blow up public education, so much the better." And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of good things that were happening, and I look at teachers at East like Jack Young, um, oh golly, the Giovaninis, and some of the people that would have been around. Trying to think, Phil Miller, down in the art department, and some of those folks
Mm-hmm.
who very vibrant personalities and very strong teachers, and those kinds of people made public education really vibrant. And unfortunately, the minds that are people in charge right now are really threatened by that, rather than embracing it and letting them do and be who they are, and teach the way they know how to do it.
Yeah. It sucks that it's becoming that way, and it's just like, provide education to these kids, but let them grow, let them be themselves, let them really want to dive into different things and really, see things different instead of just what's laid down in front of them by paper. It's keeping those avenues open. I think nowadays, especially right now, I think it's more important now than ever.
Well, I would agree. I mean, we're at a really critical point in our history, and we're going to be facing some pretty big choices in terms of how do we deal with it, and isn't it time that we do deal with it?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, until we leave that up to the people who are in that, whether or not we like Republicans or Democrats or whatever politically, I mean, I hate to say this, but it don't matter what size it is. We've been going through this since the 70s, regardless of party. And the more they've become involved with it, sort of the worse, that it's been. And until it gets back to a point where it's like, listen, the teachers are the ones that went through the education. They're the ones that have to go through continued education. Most of the time they have to get their master program, if not their PhD at some point. Until they're kind of in control, I just don't see, I'm not sure it'll ever get, because everyone wants to have their, grip, be that one side or the other, some for worse and dumber reasons than others, obviously, but
yes.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
one side wants it to be sort of like this weird morality struggle, and the other one wants it to be a money struggle. And but again, until we look at it like what you've said this entire time, what we've said about you this entire time is that, like, your classroom was your classroom, right? Like, and that should be the dictator of that, right? Is not anyone, like, there shouldn't be a, like you said, this sort of Republican output of like, I got to know exactly what you're teaching and, what is your moral character standing, sir? Like, there doesn't need to be that, but there also doesn't need to be like, okay, let's establish this common core where we are telling you exactly what to teach kind of thing either.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the problem, and again, everyone else goes to, if an engineer goes and gets a degree to be an engineer, they were hired to make structures and create better and more efficient ways of doing that. That's why they get hired, right? But for some reason, we don't do that in schools. You're like, oh, well, better, more efficient. Like you said, you didn't become better or more efficient until someone stopped breathing down your neck.
Right.
And unfortunately, you know,
Well, and
big daddy.
you guys know that there were. I mean, if I were teaching now, I'd be fired for some of the things I would say. Uh, but you know, it's part of
That's
the.
why I didn't want to do it.
Yeah, you know, I, I still there are a couple of times I think, how did I ever get away with that stuff? Um, but because I even had like I think it was the year before I decided to retire, one of the administrators pulled me into the office and said something about, you know, we have a student who is really concerned that your class has homosexual overtones. And I said,
Duh. Just
well,
kidding.
I'm a gay man.
Hello.
I know. I'm like, I'm going to talk about my partner, and just like other people talk about their husbands or wives. And so if that's homosexual overtones, then they have to
Yeah,
get
I
over
remember
it.
one time. I guess I'll tell this and then we can wrap up. I do remember one time when you were with what was his name, Tom or whatever, and he came and like he played the piano.
Oh, Todd.
Todd, yeah. And my mom was like, "Did he bring his boyfriend?" I was like, "Yeah, he's dope at playing the piano." Like, whatever, man.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
He did.
yeah. So
Oh,
yeah,
man.
I can see that now, but it's just but it is funny looking at it too from my perspective. Was like, dude, whatever. I mean, he's a guy coming playing piano. You know what I mean? Like,
Who cares?
at the end of the day,
Yeah.
people like that exist in the world, and that's just how it is.
Well, that was part of it too for me. It was like, please have an open mind, and because there are so many, you know, society is very diverse, and if you cannot learn to at least accept those, you know, people different from who you are, then life's not worth living.
Yeah, but again, like, and that's a testament to your teaching style too. Is like, again, you know, I'd go home and yeah, I mean, you know this already, but I had those conversations with, you know, my parents about you. I mean, you know, we had that.
I would hope
We
that.
actually,
I
you
would
know,
hope
you
that.
and I actually did have this conversation way back when, you know, because I told you this, like, you know, what I really thought was great about is that, you know, you never ever made that like a teaching point. Like, all right, kids, let me teach you about how, you know, I am this way. You know what I mean? You really
Yeah.
like, all right, we knew that or whatever, but that was
Mhm.
one of those things where it was like, there was not like this weird political agenda that you were ever making ever with us. It was all about teaching,
Right.
and you were who you were, and you were never going to deny it. And because of that, like, we all learned that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was never, and you know, there was never a time where I was like, there is an agenda here outside of just being my teacher and teaching me how to sing well.
Mm-hmm.
Ever.
Yeah.
I never felt that way anyway.
I didn't think I did that, but you know, who knows these days what people can accuse one
Yeah.
of. But
Yeah.
yeah, I was there to teach music and hopefully teach you guys about other cultures and
Mm-hmm.
what music do they sing, and
Right.
you know, why has this been written, and what can it teach us about who they were or are.
Yeah.
That was far more important to me than any other supposed agenda.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing, and I think Zach could probably attest to this, is that, you know, you actually cared, you know, for us, not only on an educational aspect, but, you know, throughout our daily lives. You know, it's like you said, that room was kind of it was like a safe haven. Like, if we had a question throughout daily life, what would Hauan say?
Yeah.
Mr. Hauan, yeah, we were annoying and we bugged the crap out of you more than likely, but it
I
was
mean, in ultra conservative,
we trusted you.
in ultra conservative white Columbus, Indiana, the safe haven of of Columbus East was your classroom. It just was, man. I mean, that's just the fact.
It was 100%.
Somebody had to.
Yeah. Well,
have we blown enough smoke for one evening?
Oh no, you can still do it some more.
All right, man. Well, it's kind of late for me, so I am. I gotta sign off here. But man, it was so great talking to you again and catching up, and it's been a great.
Our
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Scales Music Podcast with me, Zack, Kenneth Hauan. Thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Peace out.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the Scales of Music podcast. I hope you enjoyed our time with Ken Hauan, Zack, and I. We had a good time, actually a great time, catching up with him, talking about music, and also how important it is within the educational field to have music included. Make sure you check us out, give us a like, and give us a download on your local favorite podcast platform, and also on YouTube. We'll talk to you soon.